right, the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, they are a team notorious for drafting guys and then trading them for present help, or trading picks. I don't know. They're a team that never felt like they really built. They just sort of got their team, and they haven't really built through the draft other than drafting guys and then trading them. But that doesn't mean they're poor drafters. That just means they're drafting guys that other teams want and package in for good NHL players, which is also a good strategy as well. So at least they're drafting pretty well to start their life as an NHL franchise. But anyway, let's get right into it for Vegas. At 48, they took Matthias Sapovaliv. I had a hard time with Sapovaliv, and 48 I think is around when I would start thinking about drafting him. Smart puck mover, pretty strong and resilient as well. Not the highest pace guy. Like, I could see a bottom six physical, smart puck moving NHL center in some way down the road. I mean, just a really sort of crafty, good timing guy. Just not sure if there's enough to really make him a high-end NHL player, but nothing is impossible. At 79, they took Jordan Gustafsson. Gustafsson, I got to pull up his data because he was one of the more underrated guys, I think. I think he has a pretty significant weakness with regards to driving possession with his feet and gaining separation speed and consistently creating. Because, I mean, his offensive threat being at 22 is good, and he was a very efficient offensive transition guy, one of the most involved zone transition players I've tracked, so he sits fourth in total zone transitions that I've tracked, and I tracked quite a few games of his. And all around, he just seems like a rock-solid pick in that range. I would really like to see him take a step with his skating, especially. He really pushes things about as hard as he can, and it doesn't really take him far enough to take over a shift, but I think that's possible. I would have honestly taken him at 48 if the name came up over Matthias Sapovaliv. He was ranked higher for me, only just. But to get him at 79, I think is really, really good value. At 128, they drafted a goaltender, a re-entry in Cameron Whitehead. You know what? He's 6'3", he's pretty big, pretty young for a re-entry guy, but I also go off of players who, have a long history of saving pucks, and while he had a relatively high workload, he did not save a ton of pucks, and the goaltenders that Vegas has drafted over the last couple of years have kind of been very much of the same archetype, and I don't know. I don't have huge expectations for Cameron Whitehead, but it looks like he's going back to the USHL this year and then going to college, and if that's what happens, you see where he's at in 4 years or something, and you never know. But I thought that of all the goaltenders in the draft, Cameron Whitehead was not on my list or on my radar. And other guys that were drafted very soon after Cameron Whitehead, like Ty Young, I believe, was still on the board. Sergei Murashov, like we just talked about with Pittsburgh, was still on the board. There were quite a few. So I think with Cameron Whitehead at 128, I mean, I'm not going to nitpick, right? It's not that crazy, but I don't really expect. I don't have huge expectations for that draft pick right now. Patrick Gay at 145. This is a twice re-entry guy for Charlottetown that I've seen a little bit over the years. I like him. I think he's one of the more skilled and agile and creative sort of offensive players that you could have drafted as a re-entry at this age. And could he jump straight to the AHL next year? I mean, I don't know what else he's supposed to do with Charlottetown this year. Maybe he goes back for an overage year and becomes one of the better QMJHL players out there, which is fine. It really doesn't matter, I don't think. I still think no matter what, his NHL upside might be a little limited, but he's fun to watch. He's a skilled player. Had a really good QMJHL playoff when I checked in on him here and there when I checked in on what was going on in the queue. It's a perfectly reasonable pick in this range, though. You take a swing on a guy who can score and finish at the QMJHL level, who's a little further along in his development. Maybe there's something there down the road. Ben Hemerling, a guy who I watched a little bit as the year went on. I mean, I found that his skill was pretty good. He could pull pucks around and stop up and change pace pretty well. His stride was pretty inefficient. I just felt like he wasn't really going places very efficiently, which is fixable. And I just get the feeling with Hemerling that, we'll see. I don't have huge expectations, but he could be a guy who evolves into a better junior scorer than he is now. He was pretty good with Everett this year, showed some pretty good skills, showed some pretty good sort of ability to change and deceive players, change pace and deceive players in transition and such. I didn't see enough out of Ben Hemerling where I'm going, I'm going to rank this guy, which, is not the end of the world. I've been wrong before, but with Hemerling, when I checked him out post-draft as well, I wasn't, late round pick, sure, whatever, take a flyer and see what happens. They drafted another re-entry in Abram Wiebe from the Chilliwack Chiefs. So he's a re-entry defender. I thought he was a little bit interesting in the limited time that I had to watch him post-draft. I don't think he's the most mobile or the fastest defenseman that you could have drafted, nor I don't think is there like huge amounts of skill or finishing ability. But I do like the way that I, at least in limited time seeing him, that he processed the game pretty well. He thinks the puck decently well, off and on the puck. He was stopping up defensive transitions pretty well in the tape that I was watching and positioned himself. I don't think he would have been on my list to draft at all, especially as a re-entry guy. I don't really know if there's NHL upside at all, but there's a decent framework in terms of processing and reading the game to work with for Wiebe. Maybe there's something down the road, but I'm not holding my breath. So Vegas, again, similar to Pittsburgh, I don't really know what to do with them. They're kind of in between this 2C and 2D range. I don't think they're going to end up with as many NHL players as Anaheim could. I don't really know if they're as high-end loaded as Vancouver was that kind of pushed them up here. I do think that Sapovaliv and Gustafsson could both be players. So I'm going to give them, it's similar to Pittsburgh, but I'll put them in the 2D, but a strong 2D. I think I liked their draft a little bit more than Pittsburgh. I'd say it's on par with someone like Ottawa, and maybe not quite as good as Dallas. It's in this weird middle range. And I think they did okay, but I think they might have been able to aim a little bit higher, especially in those sort of mid rounds with some of the guys that were slipping through. And at 48, I think they could have done more damage than Sapovaliv, but I feel like he'll be an NHL player of some kind. So Vegas did quite well, finishing somewhere in the lower part of the leaderboard, but we're only we're barely, I think, halfway through the teams here. So lots more to go. The next one's going to be the Nashville Predators. So we'll see you then, and thank you very much for joining me.